Imagine this. You stand on a precipice at dawn, the chill of morning air pressing against your skin, and the horizon ahead yawns like a promisand, a warning. The world below is still cloaked in shadow, as if sleeping through the inevitable tremor you're about to unleash. You lift a single foot, poised to step off the edge, knowing that this one action, this small, almost imperceptible choice will ripple through every fiber of your being, shattering the reality you once held so dear. What if the truth you cling to is itself the barrier, standing between you and a life of genuine freedom? What if the most terrifying thing you can do is also the simple? You've been told to chase happiness, to follow your passions, to seize the day at something deeper. An invisible snare has always tugged you back. It lurks in the half glances you cast at your phone, the silent fears that lace your dreams, the subtle whispers convincing you to settle for comfort over transformation. You've ignored it for so long that you've begun to believe it doesn't exist. But here, on this edge, you cannot ignore it any longer. You feel it in your throat, a tightening knot of dread and exhilaration. Your heart pounds with a dual rhythm, one beat screaming, "Stay safe," the other daring, "Leap." How often have you felt this tension, this suspended moment between safety and abyss? And how often have you slipped back into routine, convincing yourself that you'll face it tomorrow? Carl Jung would call this the encounter with the shadow, the unacknowledged part of yourself that hides in plain sight, feeding your anxieties and defining your limits. It's the secret force that makes you look away when your dreams beckon most urgently. Yet it is precisely in acknowledging this force in stepping toward that precipice that transformation begins. Imagine tasting the metal tang of fear on your tongue, feeling its electric charge coursing through your veins. The mind recoils, telling you that all is lost if you dare to break free of the old pattern. But what if this recoil is the very measure of your courage? What if the moment your psyche recoils is the moment you stand inches from rebirth? You might ask, why would a single action seemingly so insignificant wield such irreversible power? Because, paradoxically, life does not change in grand gestures, but in tiny, decisive pivots that redefine your entire trajectory. You change your gaze, and the landscape shifts. You rename your fear, and it loses dominion. You make one choice, and a cascade of new possibilities floods in, washing away old certainties like sandcastles before the surf. Do you feel the tremor beneath your feet? That is the collective weight of every habit you've formed, every unspoken agreement you've made with self. What if you could break that agreement with one decisive no? What if, in that instant, the world tilted on its axis, revealing vistas both wondrous and terrifying? Perhaps you remember a time when you almost acted, dialing a stranger across town, quitting a job that drained your soul, confessing a truth that would upend your universe. The voice in your head soft, insistent whispered that it wasn't the right moment, and so you waited. The moment passed, the ghost of what might have been hovered in your periphery, a silent reproach. Now ask yourself, how many of those moments have you squandered? How many chances have slipped through your fingers because you allowed the unseen force of inertia to dictate your fate? The answer is etched in the fine lines of your face, the restless stirrings of your mind. It's there in the way you hesitate at thresholds, even as life beckons on the other side. Yet here you are, moments from action. The choice glimmers like a blade sharp, decisive, irreversible. Once you step off this edge, there is no turning back. You will cross a boundary where the known world dissolves, and you stand naked before possibility itself. You will encounter parts of yourself you've long neglected, your raw potential, your deepest dread, your unspoken desires. Are you ready to act? Can you bear the weight of knowing that, in a single instant, you might redefine every relationship, every ambition, every fragment of your identity? The answer lies in the space between your foot and the void. Will you step forward or recoil? Take a breath. Feel the tension coiling in your chest. That coil is your life, waiting to be rewound, reshaped, reimagined. Lean into it, because on the other side of this moment lies the revelation you've been chasing, the one that will shatter your illusions and illuminate a new path. And once that path is revealed, everything changes forever. You've felt the tremor, and now, as you peer into the architecture of your own psyche, you begin to notice a hidden malfunction, an invisible lever, pulling the strings behind every hesitation, every impulse. It's embedded in the scaffolding of your thoughts, encoded in the mantras you repeat without knowing. I'm not ready. This isn't who I really am. If I fail, I lose everything. These quiet declarations don't shout, they echo. Like underground streams, they carve unseen tunnels through your consciousness, pulling you away from risk and back into the familiar prison of routine. This silent force has a name: the comfort principle, a parasite of the soul. It feeds not on your failures, but on your unused potential. Nietzsche warned of this decay when he spoke of the last man, a figure who seeks only comfort, who fears the unknown more than he fears mediocrity. The last man yawns through life, satisfied with survival. You see him every time you press snooze, every time you abandon a bold idea at the first rumble of doubt. But the comfort principle rarely acts alone. It partners with something even more insidious: the internalized observer. Jung called it the critical parent within the voice that borrowed the tone of your teachers, your family, your society. This voice doesn't scream, it whispers with authority. It grades every dream, it questions every impulse. It convinces you that safety is synonymous with wisdom, that submission is a form of maturity. And so, before you've even begun, you fold your potential into a shape more pleasing to others. Schopenhauer spoke of suffering as the inevitable companion of desire, but he also knew that the will, the very force that leads us into pain, could also be our salvation. You suffer because you crave comfort. But the paradox is this: true comfort is found not in avoiding suffering, but in choosing suffering with purpose. The moment you begin to desire the unknown more than the predictable, the comfort principle begins to lose its grip. But how do you cultivate a will that turns toward thunder instead of silence? Sartre offers no easy escape. He reminds us that we are condemned to be free. That freedom is not a gift, it's a burden. You must choose endlessly, and each choice chisels your being into form. But the terror of freedom is its weight. What if you choose wrong? What if you fail, and it was all your fault? And so you defer. You outsource your agency to traditions, to experts, to social media algorithms. Each time you choose not to choose, a thread of your true self unravels. Then comes Viktor Frankl, who discovered, in the horror of Auschwitz, that even when everything is taken, one freedom remains: the freedom to choose how you respond. In this truth lies the seed of meaning, not in achievement, not in escape, but in the stance you take toward your pain. And yet, in the quiet chambers of your own life, you miss this. You think the ache before a hard conversation is a flaw. You mistake indecision for weakness. You assume that comfort means you're doing something right. But meaning is born in friction. It is the flame struck in moments of decision, not the warmth of what's familiar. This hidden problem, the toxic web of comfort, judgment, and fear, did not begin with you. It has roots in the human condition. Huxley foresaw a world anesthetized by pleasure, distracted to death by entertainment, a society that doesn't burn, but slowly cools into apathy. You live in his prophecy each time you scroll past discomfort and sink into curated feeds. You think distraction spares you from despair, but it only deepens your detachment. You don't escape yourself, you dilute yourself. Society deepens the trap with its contradictory sermons. Be whoever you want to be, but stay in line. Chase your dreams, but make sure they're marketable. Individualism becomes a brand. Authenticity gets monetized. You're told to optimize your life, but never how to live it. And so your inner world becomes a maze of mirrors, shiny, endless, and empty. No true reflection, just a recursive loop of performance. And perform you do. You wear the mask that Jung called the persona, a version of yourself you've sculpted for others. Polished, likable, clean, but beneath it, something feral and real lies dormant. You forget the feel of your original questions. You forget the sound of your unfiltered voice. And the longer the mask stays on, the harder it is to remember who put it there. Here lies the paradox in its sharpest form. The very tools meant to liberate you, expression, abundance, become your cage. You drown in possibilities, paralyzed by the tyranny of infinite choice. And as long as this structure goes unexamined, you will continue mistaking the cell for a sanctuary. You will decorate your cage and call it freedom. But you are not a spectator to this architecture. You are its unwitting. Nietzsche's Bermensch doesn't emerge by accident. He rises only by confronting the abyss and choosing, still, to affirm life. Frankl's defiance was not in optimism, but in clear-eyed courage. Jung's path of individuation demands, not success, but grace in the embracing of the shadow you were taught to disown. So look deeper. Ask, Which voices in your mind are truly yours? Which judgments did you inherit without consent? Which values are rooted in your soul and which were planted by strangers? Every unexamined belief is a saboteur. Every piece of unconscious programming is a lever the comfort principle pulls when you hesitate. And now, once again, you feel that coiled tension humming at the edge of awareness. But this time, you can see its source. You recognize the whisper. Stay where it's safe. You sense the judgment. You'll never be enough. And underneath it all, something stranger still, the terrible beauty of freedom itself. Alive and waiting, pulsing like a forgotten drum. This is the moment of stark recognition. You can no longer claim ignorance. Your hesitation was never harmless. It was the slow, silent erosion of your becoming. What lies ahead is more than the breaking of a habit, it's the unraveling of a worldview, and it will ask everything from you. But only through that unraveling can something real begin. You feel the tremor of those buried forces coursing through your veins, and now you sense their silent echo in every corner of your existence. You wake before dawn, heart fluttering with anxiety over tasks you've yet to begin. You scroll through news feeds not for information, but to dull the hum of disquiet in your mind. You hover at the threshold of decisive conversations, only to retreat, your tongue tied by an invisible leash. What if none of these moments are accidents, but the byproducts of a subtle architecture designed to keep you compliant, unremarkable, unfinished? This architecture is assembled from cognitive biases that shape nearly every decision you make. There's the confirmation bias, nudging you to seek evidence that supports your fears that you're not ready, that you're not enough, while dismissing any contradiction. You clutch to the notion that the status quo is safe, that the absence of proof for change is proof that change is impossible. Meanwhile, the status quo bias holds you in place, granting a perverse comfort to inaction, as though stagnation were the natural order of things. Each bias acts like a phantom limb, convincing you that any movement will cost you an essential part of yourself. Neurologically, your brain is a prediction machine, wired to minimize surprise and maximize reward. But that reward circuit has been hijacked by the very comforts you mistake for vitality's social media likes. Bingeable content, small daily routines. Every click reinforces the pathways that favor distraction over depth, routine over risk. Dopamine surges when you indulge these, training your mind to crave the familiar hum of immediate feedback rather than the disorienting rush of meaningful challenge. Culturally, you are immersed in what Viktor Frankl would call the eugenic neuroses, an existential emptiness arising from the absence of meaning. The world offers you thousands of choices for how to spend your hours, but none that compel your spirit. You wander a digital thrift store of half-baked identities, the hobbyist cook, the weekend yogi, the aspiring Each persona feels like temporary shelter, never quite resonating with the deeper chords of who you might become. With every superficial identity you try on, you distance yourself from the raw material of your own becoming. And then there, as the mirror stage of society, you see reflections of yourself in other people, as curated images, and you believe those mirrors instead of your own perceptions. You compare your unedited self flawed, uncertain, raw to the polished facades of celebrities and peers. This gap between the mirror and the marble of your true nature widens, until you lose sight of the sculptor within. You begin to fear that your essence is too coarse, too fractured, to reveal to the world. Look at your relationships. How many of them teeter on the brink of authenticity, never crossing into true vulnerability because you've internalized the belief that emotional exposure is weakness? You nod politely while your thoughts scream for honest exchange. You invest yourself in others only, insofar as it threaten the safety of your carefully constructed persona, and so your connections remain functional but hollow, like houses furnished with beautiful rugs, but empty at their core. At work, the same engine of unseen consequences revs. You adhere to incremental goals and corporate KPIs, believing that success is a linear ascent. You learn to navigate office politics, to color within the lines of managerial expectation, while your own creative spark flickers in the dim corridors of compliance. The inner whisper that urges you toward artistry, toward innovation. You've labeled him. You're buried beneath layers of protocol and performance reviews, never realizing that protocol itself feeds on your untested brilliance. Even your sense of time is warped. You live perpetually in a later, as though the present moment were a faulty apparatus, better suited to procrastination. Later, you'll start that novel. Later, you'll speak your truth. Later, you'll break free. That later is an illusion, a psychological trap that erases urgency and replaces it with a slow bleed of regret. And the consequences compound. Anxiety becomes a constant undertow, dragging you below the surface of your life. You find yourself exhausted at day's end, not from physical exertion, but from wading through currents of self-doubt. You experience fleeting moments of inspiration, only to watch them dissipate like vapor. Because action would require uprooting habits you've held since childhood. You feel ashamed, believing you lack willpower, when in truth, your will has been siphoned off by these unseen forces. Society absorbs these consequences, too. Collectively, you become a generation of bystanders, witnesses to injustice, who hesitate to raise their voices, creators who fear their own originality, seekers who settle for curated experiences instead of genuine encounters. You marvel at the courage of others while your own courage dwindles. The world's potential dims under the weight of unspoken possibilities. And here's the cruel twist. You've convinced yourself that this measured, cautious existence is maturity. You say, I've learned to be pragmatic, but what you're really saying is, I've accepted the limits placed on me by fear. You speak of wisdom, but you're echoing the wisdom of those who stayed silent, who never tested the boundaries of their own potential. You mistake acquiescence for insight, yet the ache within you is a signal that you are alive, that you are destined for more than hollow rituals of comfort. That ache is the tremor rebounding from the moment you first stood on the precipice, the moment you glimpsed what life could demand. It insists that you stop evading the unseen consequences and start confronting them. You may feel complicit in your own captivity, but you're not powerless. Every cognitive bias, every neurological pathway, every cultural script you've internalized can be rewired, reimagined, dismantled. But before you can act, you must see the full extent of the cage. You must feel the cold weight of its iron bars, its silent refusal to allow you beyond the expected boundaries. Do you feel the chill pressing against your skin? That is the reality of unconscious forces, the deep currents dragging you downstream, unnoticed. To break free, you must first name them, map their reach, and acknowledge their power over you. Only then can the spark of rebellion ignite. Only then can you begin to dismantle the machinery of your own limitation. The air grows still around you, pregnant with the possibility of change if you dare step into the storm. The consequences of continued inertia are clear. A life half lived, a promise unfulfilled, an echo of what might have been. But the consequences of rebellion are unknown, and therein lies both peril and salvation. You stand before a threshold. On one side, the comfort of predictable chains. On the other, the thrilling risk of genuine freedom. Can you feel the pull? The tension coils once more, and you realize that simply understanding these forces will not suffice. Knowledge without action is the deadliest form of complacency. You are poised, again, at the cusp of decision. Ahead lies the path of rebellion, the radical, counterintuitive steps that shatter the old orders within you. And with that path comes the power to reshape every facet of your life. The question now is not what binds you, but how you will break free. You sense the coil of tension loosening, as if something deep within you is stirring, straining against its prison. This is the moment of rebellion, when you decide that safety, convenience, and convention are no longer worth the price of your soul. You already know the hidden forces that have bound you. The comfort principle whispering false promises, the internalized observer mocking your audacity, the biases and scripts that have scripted your life. Now you must turn that knowledge into action. Begin with the smallest revolt. Interrupt the patterns that feed your inertia. The next time your finger hovers over the scroll button, stop, close the app, sit in the silence that your habit was designed to avoid. Feel the itch of emptiness in your mind, and instead of rushing to fill it, lean into it. This is not a passive void, but a crucible, an empty space ready to be forged into a new habit of self. Each moment you choose presence over distraction, you strike a hammer blow against the fortress of your old comfort. But presence alone is insufficient. You must also reframe your inner dialogue. Whenever the internalized observer pipes up, you can't, you're not ready, you'll fail. You must respond with a counterinsurgency of affirmation. Borrow from Nietzsche's practice of self-overcoming. Refuse to accept any thought that does not serve your highest becoming. When the voice says you're unworthy, answered by listing the small victories you've earned, the mornings you rose before dawn, the conversations you risked having, the moments you honored your truth. With each rebuttal, your psyche learns a new grammar, one that speaks in possibility rather than prohibition. History is full of examples of this radical inner shift. Consider Skren, Kierkegaard's leap of faith. He refused to wait for certainty and instead embraced possibility itself, crafting an existence defined by passionate commitment rather than rational proof. Or look at Rosa Parks, who, faced with the accustomed toll of segregation, simply declined to budge. Her one action ignited a movement. To possess that spark, it need not be monumental in outward form. It must be monumental in intention. Next, adopt what Frankl called the defiant power of the human spirit. Choose meaning over comfort in every small decision. When offered an easy path, ask, will this choice nurture my sense of purpose, or will it cement my complacency? If the former, follow it. If the latter, rejects it even if it shames you with social disapproval or strips you of easy praise. You are not playing for applause. You are playing for authenticity. Now, step outside the ego's boundaries. Seek experiences that challenge your narrative of self. Volunteer in an unfamiliar community. Learn a skill whose learning curve intimidates you. Public speaking, martial arts, a foreign language. Deliberately place yourself in the crucible of discomfort. Every novel skill you attempt rewires your brain's reward pathways, demonstrating that growth resides outside the old comfort zone. With each small conquest, the fortress of your previous limitations fractures further. In conjunction with outward challenges, engage in deliberate shadow work. Journal at night about the impulses and anxieties that arise when you contemplate bold action. Write without editing. Let the darkest recesses of your fear spill onto the page. Then read it back and ask, is this fear serving my evolution, or is it protecting an outdated version of me? By shining light into the shadow, you rob it of its covert power. Yet rebellion is not merely an individual affair. You must also reconfigure your environment. Identify the 3 people you spend the most time with. If their influence pulls you toward complacency through easy judgments, passive routines, or tacit disapproval, distance yourself. Seek out those whose presence ignites your potential. Mentors who have walked the path of transformation. Peers who challenge your assumptions. Collaborators who see your latent gifts. The company you keep becomes the soil in which your rebellion either withers or Marcus Aurelius wrote, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. To reclaim this power, build micro-rituals that anchor you in your higher self. Before you sleep, list 3 acts of courage you will commit tomorrow. Upon waking, repeat a phrase that affirms your readiness. I stand at the edge and I leap. Use your own voice as the strongest ally against the chorus of doubt. Perhaps the most counterintuitive step, cultivate gratitude for discomfort. When fear arises, thank it. When your heart races, embrace the pulse as a sign of aliveness. This is the alchemy of transformation, turning leaden fear into golden fuel. The very sensations you once fled become the raw energy that powers your ascent. As these practices coalesce, you will notice a subtle shift in your inner geography. The precipice you once feared becomes a vantage point. From here, you see not a yawning abyss, but a doorway into uncharted territory. Your every habit begins to tilt toward possibility. Your inner critic quiets as your rebel heart beats louder. At this stage, you are no longer a prisoner of the hidden forces you are there. But take heed. Rebellion is never truly complete. The comfort principle is cunning. It will continually adapt, offering new temptations for safe surrender. You must remain vigilant, renew your rituals, refine your environment, revisit your shadow work. Let your rebellion become a lifelong practice rather than a one-off surge of will. Feel the power coursing through you now, the affirmation of agency, the bittersweet tang of risk, the electric promise of uncharted dawns. A new architecture is rising within, one built on conscious choice, courageous vulnerability, and unwavering devotion to meaning. And yet, even as you stand triumphant, you sense that this is not the final frontier. The tools of rebellion you have forged must now be wielded toward the ultimate truth that lies beyond action, the revelation that will reframe your entire existence. That revelation awaits in the next decisive moment of clarity, when the final veil is drawn back and you grasp the essence of your own becoming. You stand at the threshold of understanding, the air around you thick with anticipation and the faint hum of possibility. Beyond the rebellion, beyond the breaking of chains, lies a final revelation that transcends action itself. It does not come as but as an unveiling, a profound shift in perception so seismic that every previous paradigm collapses in its wake. Breathe deeply now, feel the stillness beneath your racing pulse, and prepare to see reality not as a series of choices, but as an expression of a singular, conscious will that weaves through the tapestry of existence. What if the self you have been struggling to free was never truly separate from the world it inhabits? What if the boundary between you and everything else is an illusion born of language and habit? In this final moment, you will glimpse that the one action so long conceived as a discrete pivot was never a thing you did, but a revelation of what you already are, the living nexus of intention and unfolding reality. Imagine standing in a crystalline chamber at twilight, walls dissolving into stardust until your body feels weightless, merging with the shifting light. You realize that your fears, your desires, your triumphs and defeats, each is a ripple in a greater current, each a note in an unfathomable symphony. As you lean into this awareness, you understand that the act of stepping off the precipice was never about breaking patterns. It was about dissolving the illusion of separation. You have chased meaning as though it were hidden in distant peaks, only to discover that meaning radiates outward from this very moment. The world you see, its people, landscapes, joys, and sorrows emerges from the same source as your own conscious gaze. You are not a solitary observer, but the living eye of existence itself, refracting reality through your unique prism of awareness. This is the ultimate truth. There is no other to conquer, no outside realm to master. Every obstacle, every ally, every heartbreak and triumph arises within this single field of consciousness. By stepping into your own depth, you awaken the field. You are both the canvas and the painter, the question and the answer. All dualities collapse. Self and world, subject and object, past and future, each reveals itself as a facet of the same infinite jewel. Do you feel it, the electric clarity that banishes old fears, as though they were shadows in the noonday sun? In this light, failure and success lose their conventional meaning. They are but coordinates on a map drawn by your own attention. What matters is not what happens, but the ever-present act of conscious engagement with what is. The single, decisive action is not in the world. It is the decision to see without filters, to note without resistance, to embrace without boundary. You might ask, if boundaries dissolve, how do you live? The paradoxical answer is that you inhabit your life more fully than ever. With the illusion of separation gone, your responsibility expands. Every thought, word, and breath shapes the unfolding whole. This truth is at once exhilarating and terrifying, for it grants you an unfettered role in the creative dance of existence. You no longer ask, what can I become? But, what will I co-create? Picture yourself walking through a field at dawn, dew collecting on grass that bends under your bare feet. Each blade gleams with its own life, yet every blade is inseparable from the fertile soil, the rising sun, the breeze that carries a bird's call. Your journey is the same, each moment alive with its own radiance, yet rooted in an unbroken web of life and mind. As the field merges with forest, so to do your daily actions speak, king listening, create and merge into a continuous act of presence. You no longer divide your life into work and rest, self-improvement and leisure. All becomes a seamless expression of the one unfolding will. The urgency you once felt to do gives way to a gentle insistence to be fully here, now, loving the play of light and shadow in every heartbeat. You have chased the one action that would change your life, but it was never a thing to be accomplished. It was a realization to be lived. The minute you let go of the quest, the minute you accept the world as the mirror of your own awakening, everything shifts. The trembling of your first step becomes the steady drumbeat of cosmic participation. Now, in this culminating moment, you see the shock of truth. The life-changing action you sought was awareness itself, unbroken, immediate, and free. With this awareness, you walk through walls of self-doubt as though they were mist. You learn that true power lies not in conquering the outside, but in attending to the inside, until the two dissolve into an unnameable, living presence. And so, you emerge on the far side of revelation, a being at once humble and infinite, carrying the weightless clarity of pure attention. What once seemed like the singular act of will becomes the continuous breath of existence. You stand, not on a precipice, but in the center of a vast unfolding mandala, each moment a petal revealing the whole. Feel the echo of this realization reverberate through your blood, through your thoughts, through the silent spaces between your words. You have been remarred not by an action in the world, but by the unshakable recognition of the world within you. Let this truth guide every choice, every interaction, every heartbeat, and as you step forward, remember the dawn in the crystalline chamber. Carry its light into every corridor of your life, for in the end, there is no final destination, only an eternal unfolding, and you are that unfolding incarnate.